Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Alzheimer's and Dementia for Dummies by Consumer Dummies, narrated by Niemi. Introduction. Pick up a newspaper or turn on the television or radio, and it won't be long before you come across a reference to Alzheimer's disease, AD, or dementia. Either someone is touting a breakthrough in research, or someone famous has been diagnosed with it, or an expert has decided that some food or other, which people have previously enjoyed without a second thought, is now believed to double our risk of developing the condition. But its media popularity isn't really that much of a shock, because dementia is on the rise. In fact, scientists estimate that every 4 seconds someone somewhere in the world is diagnosed with dementia, so the number of cases is rising pretty fast. Put simply, that increase means that more and more families are dealing with dementia or AD, trying to provide care for a loved one while maintaining some semblance of balance in their own lives. If you have a family member who's been diagnosed with AD or dementia, chances are you've got a lot of questions. Alzheimer's and Dementia for Dummies tries to help you find the answers that are right for your particular situation. The media paints a big, frightening picture of how the increasing number of Americans with dementia will affect the economy, the healthcare industry, lost productivity, and a dozen other markers. However, little of that information is likely to hold much meaning for you as the family member that now must care for a loved one with a memory disorder. You want to know how Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia is going to affect your loved one as time goes on. As a caregiver, you want to know how to provide the best care for the person with dementia while you keep all the other balls in the air: work, spouse, the rest of the family, and other obligations. About this book. Dementia and AD are progressive conditions that affect sufferers more as time goes on. At present, no cures are available. Although that is tough to swallow, we want to help you realize that you can do many things to improve the quality of life for both your loved one with a memory disorder and yourself, particularly if you're the primary caregiver. Alzheimer's and Dementia for Dummies takes a realistic look at dementia and AD and offers pertinent practical advice for dealing with the myriad of concerns and responsibilities that a primary caregiver must assume when managing a patient with a memory disorder. We look at the treatments available, both from mainstream medicine and complementary therapies, and review the evidence of what works and what doesn't. Other sections give tips to caregivers about how to handle difficult symptoms that may occur as the condition progresses. We emphasize the importance of taking care of yourself as the caregiver as you care for your loved one. We provide advice on the financial and legal issues that need to be considered. And we walk you through the details of how to choose the right residential care facility for your loved one should the need arise, plus much more. The main information about each topic is contained in the main text of each chapter, but you'll also hear sidebars. These offer interesting asides designed to complement the rest of the chapter rather than essential information. So if a sidebar doesn't interest you, just skip it. You'll still be able to understand everything else without it. Foolish assumptions. As we wrote this book, we kept in mind everyone who has dementia or AD, or who may one day be affected by them. It's for those who are just generally worried about dementia and AD and want to find out more about the conditions and how they develop. If you're currently experiencing symptoms that you think may mean you have a memory disorder and want to know what to do next, you'll find valuable information here. We've also written this book for people who've already been given the diagnosis and need advice about how to get the best care available. People who are looking after people with dementia or AD can also use this book as a resource for being the best caregivers they can be. But despite the wealth of information, we've designed this book so you don't need to have a degree in medicine or biology to understand the science stuff or be a lawyer to write a watertight will. Everything in this book should make sense to everyone with an interest in dementia and how best to care for the people who develop it. Icons used in this book. As you go through the book, you'll notice that a variety of different icons pop up in the margins. These are designed to identify information that you need to know, information that may be interesting but you can live without, and hints about how to understand what you're hearing. Tip: these are handy bits of information that are worth remembering because they will help you deal with problems and perhaps head them off before they arise. Remember, these are key facts and important words that anyone wanting to get a handle on dementia or AD and what they're all about will want to know. Warning: this icon flags potential dangers and pitfalls that can lead to problems when managing dementia or AD. Technical stuff: this icon points out information that's interesting or in-depth, but that isn't necessary for you to hear. Beyond the book. In addition to the material in this book, this product also comes with some Access Anywhere goodies on the web. These resources are crammed with useful summaries about everything you need to know about dementia. Check out the free cheat sheet at dummies.com/cheat sheet/Alzheimer's and dementia for more information about early symptoms of dementia and AD and tips about finding a suitable residential facility when your loved one can no longer be cared for at home. You'll also find online articles at dummies.com/extras/Alzheimer's and dementia. One gives advice on how to cope with a patient who wanders. Another discusses whether you should turn over power of attorney to a lawyer. The third talks about ensuring the patient's spiritual needs are met in her final days. And the last one lists 10 points to tell the hospital staff if the person with the memory disorder is hospitalized for more than a few hours. Where to go from here? We didn't design this book to be heard from beginning to end, although if you want to do that, it takes you on a logical journey from finding the diagnosis to dealing sensitively with end-of-life care. Instead, each chapter is designed to stand alone. You can hear the chapters just as easily in a completely random order according to your area of interest as in numerical order by chapter. If you don't know a thing about dementia or AD, or you just can't bring yourself to begin a book in the middle, start from the beginning with Chapter 1. If a loved one has received a diagnosis of dementia or AD and you want to know what treatments and care are available, check out Part 2. If you need advice on caring for someone with dementia or AD, see Part 3. If you're at the end of your rope and need some advice about maintaining your own mental and physical health, go to Part 4. Basically, thanks to the organization of all For Dummies books, the choice of how you go through this book is completely yours. But however you decide to set off, we hope you enjoy learning more about this increasingly important subject. Part 1. Getting Started with Alzheimer's and Dementia. Web Extras. Visit dummies.com for free access to great Dummies content online. In this part, get an overview of dementia and Alzheimer's disease and see how the two are related. Know what symptoms lead a doctor to consider the diagnosis of a memory disorder. Discover the causes of dementia, the risk factors for developing it, and ways to possibly protect yourself from getting it. Look at some other medical conditions whose symptoms, although similar to dementia, can be reversible with appropriate treatment. Chapter 1. An overview of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. In this chapter, seeing the relationship between dementia and Alzheimer's disease, understanding the link between age and dementia, recognizing the 4 main types of dementia. If you're listening to a book about dementia, you first need to understand what the term means. People have a whole lot of different ideas about what sort of condition the word dementia suggests. For some, it's the diagnostic label you give to people who keep having senior moments and regularly forget names and where they put their eyeglasses. To others, it refers to people who are old and confused and spend all day shouting at the television and letting their friends and neighbors know exactly what they think of them. Although some of these symptoms clearly can be part of the picture of dementia, neither of the people described actually fit the diagnosis. The first is probably just forgetful but otherwise well, and the second may simply be grumpy and bad-tempered. Dementia has a very clear definition, and the diagnosis should never be made lightly. This chapter looks in detail at what dementia is and what it certainly is not, and serves as a jumping-off point for what you can expect to face when your loved one receives a dementia or Alzheimer's disease (AD) diagnosis. Defining the relationship between dementia and Alzheimer's disease. This section explains what dementia is and isn't, and then does the same for Alzheimer's. As you hear this text, keep in mind the relationship between dementia and AD. In many cases, what we write about dementia applies to AD, but what we write about AD may not apply to dementia in all of its forms. Understanding what dementia is. Dementia is a general term for a decline in mental ability, including impaired memory, language, reasoning, judgment, visuospatial skills, and orientation severe enough to interfere with daily life. Think of dementia as a big general category like the word building. Just as there are many specific types of buildings, stores, houses, cabins, skyscrapers, factories, and so on, there are many specific forms of dementia. AD is the most common cause of dementia, making up about 60% of dementia cases. We discuss other forms of dementia later in this chapter. Dementia isn't a single entity. Multiple different medical conditions that affect normal brain functioning are causes of dementia. The World Health Organization, WHO, defines dementia thus: a syndrome, usually of a chronic or progressive nature, in which there is deterioration in cognitive function, i.e., the ability to process thought, beyond what might be expected from normal aging. It affects memory, thinking, orientation, comprehension, calculation, learning capacity, language, and judgment. Consciousness is not affected. The impairment in cognitive function is commonly accompanied and occasionally preceded by deterioration in emotional control, social behavior, or motivation. This definition, however, still contains a fair amount of medical jargon, so we try to come up with a simpler but still accurate version by considering each of the key terms used by the WHO. Syndrome. This word describes the symptoms that together are characteristic of a particular medical condition. People with the condition have most of these symptoms but don't have to show all of them to receive the diagnosis. Thus, with dementia, one person may have poor memory and language but still have judgment enough to not walk out into a busy road, whereas another may have problems with both memory and judgment but have no changes in language skills. Chronic and progressive. These terms mean that the condition is ongoing long-term and gets steadily worse with time. Many people think that the word chronic means that something is severe. Although dementia may be severe for some people, it's mild in others. Chronic here means long-lasting. Consciousness. Used in relation to dementia, this word takes on both of its meanings. People with dementia are both awake, as opposed to unconscious, and mentally aware of their surroundings, although what's going on around them is confusing to them. Remember, a number of diseases of the brain that lead to a collection of progressively worsening symptoms affecting a person's thought processes, mood, and behavior can cause dementia. Eventually, the person loses the ability to carry out the basic tasks of daily living. In the Realizing that Dementia Doesn't Just Mean Alzheimer's section later in this chapter, we explain the 4 main types of dementia to help you understand the bigger picture of memory disorders. Grasping what dementia is not. In the past, dementia has been referred to as senility or senile dementia. This terminology reflects the previously common but incorrect belief that serious mental decline is a normal part of aging. Many myths and misunderstandings circulate about dementia, and to get a grasp on what dementia actually is, It's important to have a clear idea about what it certainly isn't. So here's a selection of some of the most common misconceptions to help sort fact from fiction. All old people get dementia. Although the chances of developing dementia do increase as people get older, it's not a normal part of the aging process. In the United States, 1 in 9 people older than 65 and 1 in 3 older than 85 suffer from it. Dementia is the same as Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is just one of a number of brain diseases that lead to dementia. Memory loss equals dementia. Dementia does affect memory, but for someone to be diagnosed with the condition, he needs to show many other more complex symptoms rather than simply poor memory alone. Everyone with dementia becomes aggressive. Even though some people with dementia can become agitated, aggression isn't a universal feature of dementia and is usually triggered by the way someone is treated or communicated with rather than being a symptom of the dementia alone. A diagnosis of dementia means a person's life is over. Despite the fact that the condition is chronic and progressive, many medical, social, and psychological treatments and strategies are available to help make life as fulfilling as possible for someone with dementia for many years. Everyone with dementia ends up in a nursing home. Although 1/3 of people with dementia do eventually need this level of intense care in the later stages of their condition, many people are able to access enough help and support to stay in their own homes. My aunt has dementia, so I'm going to get it too. Some forms of dementia do have a genetic component and may run in families, but these are in the minority. For most people, it doesn't follow that because a relative has dementia, they'll get it too. And contrary to what one patient thought, you can't catch it from your aunt either. Understanding what Alzheimer's disease is. As previously stated, AD is a form of dementia. Although all AD patients have dementia, not all dementia patients have AD. The Alzheimer's Association defines Alzheimer's disease as an irreversible progressive brain disease that slowly destroys memory and thinking skills, eventually even the ability to carry out the simplest tasks. AD is a fatal disease, ending inevitably in death. Alzheimer's disease was named after a German physician, Alois Alzheimer, who first identified the condition in 1906 when he performed an autopsy on the brain of a woman who'd been suffering severe memory loss and confusion for years. He observed microscopic amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tangles in the woman's brain tissue under a microscope. He then correctly hypothesized that these abnormal deposits were responsible for the patient's loss of memory and other cognitive problems. To this day, AD can only be diagnosed with 100% accuracy through an autopsy that reveals the presence of the characteristic plaques and tangles in the brain. However, a comprehensive examination and good workup do provide a reliable diagnosis with greater than 90% accuracy. Abnormal deposits of specific proteins inside the brain disrupt normal brain function and cause the cognitive and functional problems typically associated with AD. Eventually, as these deposits spread throughout the brain tissue starts dying, which leads to further cognitive impairment. The resulting brain shrinkage can be seen in CT scans and MRI scans. Current research is focused on trying to determine what causes these deposits and is looking for ways to prevent or reverse them before they cause permanent brain damage. Seeing what AD is not. The preceding section, defining the relationship between dementia and Alzheimer's disease, talks about what AD is. Now allow us to go over what it isn't. AD is not curable, contagious, a natural part of the aging process, something you get from using deodorant or cooking in aluminum pans, inevitable if you live long enough. Although certain familial forms of AD do run in families, these forms are extremely rare, accounting for less than 5% of all cases. So just because your mother or your brother got AD doesn't automatically mean that you're going to get it as well. No test can predict whether you'll get AD unless you have the very rare inherited form of AD. A blood test exists that can tell you whether you have a certain form of a cholesterol-carrying protein associated with a higher incidence of AD, but that's all that it can tell you. The test can't tell you whether you'll actually develop the condition because at least 50% of the people who have the risk factor never get AD. For ethical reasons, healthcare professionals advise against taking this blood test or undergoing other genetic testing because they want to spare their patients unnecessary worry about something that'll probably never happen even if the tests do come out positive. They also recommend against testing because if a person does find that he has inherited the gene or the risk factor, this information may negatively impact the person's ability to get long-term care coverage and the increased cost for health insurance. Looking at the link between age and dementia. A clear correlation exists between increasing age and the chances of developing dementia. In fact, less than 1% of people are diagnosed under the age of 65. Here are the figures. Dementia diagnosis by age. Age, younger than 65. Number diagnosed, 1 in 1,500. Age, 65 to 70. Number diagnosed, 1 in 100. Age, 71 to 79. Number diagnosed, 1 in 20. Age 80 to 89. Number diagnosed, 1 in 4. Age 90 plus. Number diagnosed, 1 in 3. The obvious question is whether dementia will become more common as people live longer. Thanks to advances in science, medicine, and technology, as a species, we're living increasingly longer. Life expectancy until 30,000 years ago is believed to have been less than 30 years, and right up until the 1800s it was common for adults to die by the age of 40. Now, the average man in the United States can expect to live for 76.4 years, while a woman can make it to the ripe old age of 81.2. Remember, these figures represent an average, and life expectancy across the United States varies depending on levels of poverty and other factors. To the same extent, life expectancy in some countries is much lower than in the United States. In the African nation of Chad, for example, it's only 49.5 years. Over the next few decades, these figures are expected to rise, along with the proportion of older people in the population as a whole. According to government figures, currently 44 million people in the United States are older than 65 years of age. By 2030, it's estimated that 25 million more elderly people will be residing in the United States, rising to around 79 million by 2050. A boy born in the United States in 2030 will have a good chance of living until he's 85, and a girl to 90. Given the rising chance of developing dementia with age, it's feared that cases will become far more common as a result of this boom in life expectancy. Realizing that dementia doesn't just mean Alzheimer's. One of the most common misconceptions about dementia is that it means AD. Alzheimer's disease certainly does mean dementia, but numerous other causes of dementia also exist. Also, consider mild cognitive impairment, which isn't yet dementia but not part of the normal aging process either. For 40% of those patients who show signs of mild cognitive impairment, dementia is unfortunately their next step, but for the remainder, their symptoms will either not develop further or may even be reversible if they are due to depression or the effects of an acute infection. Considering the big 4 types of dementia. On safari in Africa, the guides bust a gut to make sure you get the best chance of glimpsing the so-called Big 5: lions, African elephants, Cape buffalo, leopards, and rhinoceros. Dementia can be broken down into the Big 4: Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, Lewy body disease, and frontotemporal dementia. Here is a quick field guide to each. Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia worldwide. In the United States, it's the cause of dementia in 62 to 80% of cases, accounting for the symptoms of more than 5.3 million people in 2015. According to the Alzheimer's Association, 1 in 9 Americans older than age 65 have Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is the 6th leading cause of death in the United States and the 5th leading cause of death in Americans age 65 and older. Refer to the earlier section, Understanding What Alzheimer's Disease Is, for more information about this form of dementia. Vascular dementia. After AD, vascular dementia is the next most common cause of dementia, affecting more than 500,000 people, roughly 10% of the total cases of dementia in the United States. It was previously known as multi-infarct or post-stroke dementia. It occurs because of decreased blood flow from blood vessel blockage or bleeding from infarcts, strokes, in the brain, which limits oxygen supply to brain cells. Vascular dementia symptoms are similar to those seen in AD, but depend on which parts of the brain the reduced blood flow affects, what parts of the brain have experienced oxygen deprivation from strokes, and how many brain cells have been affected. A person who has experienced strokes may also suffer with additional weakness or even paralysis of limbs and speech difficulties. Circulation problems have become more common as we get older and can affect people who already have AD. As a result, at least 10% of people have mixed dementia. That is, they have Alzheimer's disease alongside vascular dementia and a mix of symptoms of both. Lewy body disease. A much rarer diagnosis, Lewy body disease makes up less than 4% of the number of dementia cases. Lewy bodies are protein deposits that damage brain cells. They're also found in the brains of people with Parkinson's disease, and as a result, an overlap exists in the symptoms of people with these two conditions. The symptoms of Lewy body dementia are also similar to those of Alzheimer's, but in addition, these sufferers also develop muscle stiffness, tremors and shakiness in their limbs, and slower movement. They also frequently experience visual hallucinations, commonly seeing animals or people around them that aren't really there. Frontotemporal dementia. Frontotemporal dementia is the least common of the big four, affecting about 50,000 people in the United States and representing less than 2% of total dementia cases. It's also the most likely of the 4 types of dementia to be diagnosed in people under the age of 65. This type of dementia is named because of the areas of the brain that it affects most, the frontal and temporal lobes. These areas of the brain are involved in memory and personality. Thus, frontotemporal dementia shares many of the features of AD, but has additional symptoms, including strange or sexually disinhibited behavior, lack of empathy, poor personal hygiene, apathy and loss of motivation, increased appetite for sweet or fatty foods, and repetitive and compulsive speech and actions. Mild cognitive impairment. Dementia light? Dementia clearly isn't simply a memory problem because it affects other thought processes along with mood and the ability to carry out all sorts of everyday tasks. Mild cognitive impairment involves more than the limitations that occur as a result of a normally aging brain, but not enough to constitute dementia. Long-term studies suggest that 10 to 20% of people age 65 and older may have mild cognitive impairment. Like dementia, mild cognitive impairment can affect a variety of normal thought processes, including memory, planning, and judgment, but it doesn't impact mood or a person's ability to perform day-to-day functions. And although it can be a sign of future dementia, most likely AD, for some people, around 60% of people who develop mild cognitive impairment don't get any worse, and some even get better. The normally aging brain. It's no secret that as people get older, bits start to wear out and don't work quite as well as they once did. Joints become creakier, backs ache, eyesight isn't quite as clear, Hair falls out or goes gray, once excitable parts of the body barely raise a smile, and memory isn't necessarily as sharp as it used to be.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?